back, ladies and gentlemen. Our focus today is going to be on carbon and why carbon is so essential for life. Carbon is one of those atoms that is just absolutely essential. It can bond in many different ways and can manifest itself in many different forms. And we're going to explore a little bit of that today by talking about the diversity of carbon in this video lecture. So let's roll up our sleeves and get to work. Our objectives today, you should be able to understand the basis of organic chemistry, just a very small amount of basic organic chemistry we're going to cover today, a little bit of naming, and a little bit of understanding about how carbon can bond to form so many different molecules that are essential for life. You should be able to explain the important features of carbon, that is, why carbon can do the things that it does, and lastly, name some basic organic compounds. So we're just going to get ready to get started, and off we go. So the basis of today's lesson is just all about organic chemistry, and organic chemistry is the study of carbon compounds that are in life forms. Our whole body is made of lots and lots of carbon. There's oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, lots of other atoms in there. But our focus today is on carbon because carbon is essential for all life. All life forms, regardless of how big or small, need carbon in order to survive, because carbon forms so many different molecules that are absolutely essential for life to take place. You'll notice when we talk about like macromolecules a little bit later on, like lipids and proteins and nucleic acids and carbohydrates, they all have carbon in them, and that's because it's essential for life. Additionally, carbon is versatile because it has 4 valence electrons. This is a very unique number of valence electrons because it allows it to bond to 4 other atoms. And that's what makes carbon so unique, is it has that ability to bond to so many different things, including other carbon atoms, that it can form many, many different types of molecules based on the fact that it has 4 valence electrons. So again, it can form up to 4 different chemical bonds. What's also unique about carbon is that it doesn't just necessarily form single bonds with other carbon atoms. If you remember, carbon will bond covalently, so they'll share electrons with other atoms. A single bond will share 2. The carbon will share 1 with the other atom, and the other atom will share 1 electron with carbon, therefore forming a single bond. But carbon can actually easily form double and triple bonds. Double bonds would mean that those 2 atoms would share 4 electrons, and triple mean that they would share 6. This provides some unique properties to the carbon molecules that you'd be creating. Additionally, carbon will form chains of carbons that are attached to hydrogens, and these are called hydrocarbons. Makes sense, right? But these are long, long chains, sometimes even 20, 30, even a couple hundred carbons in length. You'll notice this a lot when we talk about lipids and the length of those carbon chains. So again, I want you to understand carbon can form long, long chains, longer than the ones you see in your pictures. We're talking hundreds of carbons in length. So how do we name hydrocarbons? That's going to be something that's very, very, very essential for you to know how to do. And so naming of the compounds is based upon 2 things. It's the number of carbon atoms that you can put in a line, and I'll show you how that works in a minute. And then the presence of a double or triple bond. So you look here, the number of carbon atoms, there's a prefix for it. And you probably know some of the ones that are on here. The ones that are probably the most confusing are the first 4. So the prefix for something with just 1 carbon atom would be meth. Okay, and the prefix with the with 2 carbon atoms would be eth, and then 3 would be prop, 4 would be but, 5 pent, 6 hex, 7 hept, and so on. And these all have to be connected to each other in a chain. So you look at the carbon molecule, and you determine which chain is the longest, and that's how you determine the prefix that you're going to use when determining how to name them. Alright, I'm going to show you how that works here in just a second, but definitely keep this chart handy because it will be necessary for you to properly name things. And we also look at the type of bonds that are present as well. And if there are only single bonds, then we end in ane. So, for example, if there are 2 carbon atoms and no double bond, we call that ethane. If there are 3 carbon atoms and it's only a single bond, we call it propane. That was my Hank Hill. You guys remember Hank Hill? I sell propane and propane accessories. And it's not very good. Sorry, I tried my best. But if there's a double bond, it ends in ene. Okay, so it would be propene if there's a double bond with 3 carbon atoms, and then if it's a triple bond, it ends in -ine. So if there's a triple bond, we'd call it propyne, which is really fun to say. Propyne, 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 propyne. Anyways, combine the prefix and the suffix, and you get the name of the compound. It's that simple. Okay, now there's a lot more to this. Trust me. I could spend a semester talking about organic nomenclature, but we're not going to get into that. So let's do some naming practice. Alright, so let's take a look at some of these chemical compounds and see if we can name them pretty easily. So, first one there, we look at the number of carbon atoms that are present, and that tells us our first prefix. So the number of carbon atoms, as you can see, there's only 1 carbon atom. So the first part will be meth. Okay, and then we look at it, are there any double bonds? There's just single, double, or triple bonds, and you can see there are only single bonds, so we call this methane. Okay, that's it. That's all you have to do. So let's move on to the next one over here, and it looks like we have 3 carbon atoms put together. So we look on our chart, and that is the root for that is prop. All right, and there are only single bonds present. So again, it ends in -ane. So we call that propane. I sell propane and propane. I can't get over that. I'm sorry. Okay, let's look at this one down here. A little bit different looking nomenclature. Count out the number of carbon atoms we have in a chain. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4. So the root for that is BUT. Good. But we notice there is a double bond present there. So we don't call this butane, we call this butene. Okay, and again, that -ene is because of the double bond that's present. Okay? Simple enough. Let's go on to the last one. Let's count out the number of carbons. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that, you look at our chart, again, that's pent. Okay, and since there is a triple bond present, well, the name's going to end in -ine, so it's going to be pentyne. Okay? And that's all there is to this. You just need to go through and be able to name those. Alright? We're not going to get into too much complications. Technically, this would be you'd have a number associated with it if it's different, but again, we're not going to get into that. I just want you to be able to name basic compounds based upon the number of carbons that are present and whether there's a presence of a double or triple bond. Okay? Be really proud of you if you can get this figured out and do a good job with this. So, a lot of times when we make carbon compounds, we don't actually draw out the carbons or the hydrogens. A lot of times we just draw lines. It's called a skeletal structure because it's just like the basic skeleton of a Lewis dot structure. And so you look here down below, each bend, each little like joint represents a carbon atom, including the ends. So for example, each part here actually represents a carbon. So there'd be a carbon here, carbon here, carbon here, carbon here, and you keep going, counting the number of carbons. Okay, so again, it's at each joint as well as the ends. So you look at the longest chain here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This is a form of octane. Okay. Now again, we're not going to get into details about the carbons that are branching off of it. We just want you to be able to know the basic structure. You're not going to see something like this on a test. But I wanted to show you that how the little lines and bends actually work in organic chemistry. Lastly, carbon can actually form branches and rings. It's not just some type of linear structure. So if you look here on the right, they can actually form rings. So you've got cyclopropane. Kind of makes sense, right? Cyclo means like circle or around. So when I have propane, which is, remember, pro is 3, cyclo would be those 3 carbons form a ring structure. Cyclobutane below, remember butane is 4, hexane 6, and it makes that basic ring structure with that number of carbons in them. And then again, these structures give all of them different properties and functions. It's really important to understand that when these are put together, even though they may put together in a different way, that may cause their chemical properties to be different. So even though cyclohexane and hexane both have 6 carbon atoms, they're going to behave differently because their bonds, their chemical bonds, are a little bit different. One's formed in a ring, one's formed in a line. That affects a lot of the chemical properties that those two molecules have. So make sure you understand that carbon can form branches and rings, and that gives very unique properties and functions to these compounds. Lastly, I want to talk about something that's called an isomer. Okay, an isomer is the same number of atoms. It looks very, very similar. They're just arranged in different ways. And the two basic isomers I want you to know are what are called cis and trans. And if we look here, the cis isomer, you notice that they are essentially mirrors of each other if I go down this way. Okay, you got 2 chlorines on the top and 2 ethyl groups on the bottom here. But if we go and look at our trans, it's a little bit different. If I draw a line this way, they will not be symmetrical. Okay, there's really no way to kind of get symmetry here, but you notice the term trans kind of means across. So you look at the chlorines are kind of across from each other in the molecule. Same thing here. The ethyl groups are across from each other. So I want to make sure you are able to differentiate between a cis isomer and a trans isomer. They have the same number of atoms, but they're arranged slightly differently. And again, this can affect the chemical properties that these organic molecules can have. So hopefully you understand the basis of organic chemistry and can explain the important features of carbon. Again, there's so much more to this, and I wish we had time to spend more time on organic chemistry because it is a fascinating science. But as long as you know the basics and what was presented in today's video, you're going to do awesome on the exam. Have a great day, guys, and we're going to talk to you later.